Now, this week there's been a lot of talk about a Naughty Dog fantasy game. First things first, right? The artist didn't post inspiration from a new game. You can see it right here. It says inspiration from a new game called Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you're talking about Valhalla. It was a fairly new game when you posted this 2 months ago. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that Naughty Dog might be working on some sort of fantasy game, because at the end of the day, he's a senior concept artist, which means he could be working on something for them, or he just really enjoyed the look and style of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as you can see here, and wanted to do some nice artwork. He doesn't have to do everything on the clock, you know. But I thought it would be good to discuss why a Naughty Dog fantasy game would actually be really good and a good step in the right direction from a company that has massively divided people in recent times. You could even say they're on some gamers' naughty list. Right, so I'm not going to sit here and defend The Last of Us Part 2. I personally really loved it. You either love it or you hate it. There seems to be no in between. But we can use that game to look at a few things that I think worked really well, regardless of how you felt about the story. Now, the Naughty Dog engine, everything that they've done since the start of Uncharted all the way up to Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2 works like an incredibly well-oiled machine. And I mean that with the deepest part of my heart. It's one of the best game engines, not just in the way that it looks on current gen, but the way that it handles and feels on current gen as well. That means that when you have things like melee combat, which you saw a fair bit of in The Last of Us Part 2, you get some incredibly slick animations. But not just that, you really feel the weight of whatever weapon you may be using. They did such a great job with the melee side of things that it makes hacking and slashing people to death a really enjoyable experience. You feel it every single time you put that knife or that machete chop something. You really feel it, and that would translate well into a fantasy game. I think we can all agree on that. So that would be my first point. They know how to use their engine to create incredible combat, not just with the gunplay, which can be really enjoyable as well, but the way that all of the animations chain together and the way that you can do environmental kills in that animation, like, is so well done, and it made for some really enjoyable points in the game, especially when you're playing as someone as physical as Abby. It really brought to life that sort of heavyweight feeling to when you're just, you know, running as like female Arnie and charging someone down and then hacking them to death, man. Now, one of the other things that they do perfect is the bow and arrow setup. Playing as Ellie using the bow and arrow is a great way to take people out from afar, and yes, it works perfectly into the stealth side of things, but at the same time, the way that it operates itself work in a very fast-paced action setting as well. They've really worked on these mechanics, as I've said. So not only do you have the melee side down, but you also have the bow and arrow and ranged attack. Both of these things would lend themselves perfectly to a fantasy game, and I don't think there's any room for disagreement on that. Another thing that Naughty Dog do perfectly is let you ride a horse. Sounds simple, but it does. It lets you ride a horse. There's that one level in Last of Us Part 2 where you're going through like the burning village area on the horse, and it's like one of the best action sequences I've been through in a while. And I can't help but think back to that scene and think, man, if I had a big old claymore and I was just slicing and dicing people off this horse while everything was burning around, that could be some really fun gameplay right there. That could be some really, or even just shooting arrows at people as I ride through this incredible scene and set. I think it would be awesome. And that's one thing that I want to move on to quickly as well, is every Naughty Dog game has such an attention to detail, it's crazy. You can go into rooms that you'll be passing through for all of a second, and that room will have its own little vibe and story going on in it. I think this would be so well used in a fantasy game. As much as I do love the stealth elements thrown into both Uncharted and The Last of Us, what I prefer about Uncharted, personally, is the fact that you can go a lot more run and gun. And I feel like instead of run and gun, it would be a lot more sort of run and slash, which is still really enjoyable. I'm not saying that you wouldn't have to use stealth elements at points in time, but I think they can really take that element away because they've done it to death with The Last of Us series. Yes, you can play that game in many ways, but a lot of the time it does force you into a realm where you kind of got to sneak around. What I think would be awesome about a fantasy game is you kind of drop all of that and leave it in the past of us, if you will. It takes everything that they can do with their engine and puts it in a completely new space. So I think, again, that would work really well. I'm not saying that Naughty Dog sticks to something too formulaic, but I'm just saying The Last of Us Part 2 and Part 1 has done everything that they need to for what it was meant to do, in the way it's meant to play. At times I've called it a hide and seek simulator. I know that's not the truth. You can really get dug in with the action and have a lot of fun, but at the same time, it would make a lot of sense if they really push it in a different direction. A lot of things that people enjoyed about Uncharted is the freedom to just go crazy, run around with a gun, or plan your routes and go through. You can do the same in Last of Us, but it works a lot better in that sort of realm when you're playing like Uncharted. What I'm not going to say though is that Last of Us lacks that, because I've seen some people do some incredible thought out runs and take out loads of people quickly, silently, even loud, but take them all out quick enough that it doesn't matter. Again, like I'm saying, this engine works so well that it can lend itself into a lot of things. But I think it's time to drop that realism a little bit and go back to that sort of element of having fun. The Last of Us 2 was so intense, it tore gamers' hearts apart, and it really divided a massive fan base. But at the same time, as much people that will hold The Last of Us Part 2 down, they'll raise Uncharted 4 up. So it's about finding somewhere in between those two things. I think if you can move into a new realm and people can get over themselves, because there seems to be a lot of like, no, you screwed over one of my favourite franchises, I will never trust you with a game again. But hey man, it's a new game, it's a new day, in theory. And if you move in to a new IP, you will raise a lot of that worry and doubts for a lot of people. So I think that moving into something as comparatively, you've got your Indiana Jones style action adventure, you know? You've got your Walking Dead sort of like horror, thriller, zombie story, right? Let's get Game of Thrones up in here. You know what I'm saying? Let's flip it up. Let's flip it up. Let's maybe not go as realistic. Maybe let's fight some dragons and stuff moving forward and some big monsters and enemies. I don't know. I just think that it would be a very smart move for the things I've listed, and I'm just going to go over them one last time for you. Okay? For melee and bow and arrow / ranged abilities, that the engine that they use to make the Naughty Dog games is perfect. It would lend itself so well into fantasy games. Riding a horse in the most recent Last of Us Part 2 is so incredibly enjoyable, and it works really, really well. Moving away from previous games into new IP allows a breath of fresh air and a palate cleanser for gamers that may not have agreed with recent choices. The attention to detail in Naughty Dog games is always so well done. I would love to see what they do with a brand new setting, one that isn't tied in so much to places we know, but a complete new world. That's it, really. That's it. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. As I said, I'm not saying we're getting any sort of Naughty Dog fantasy game, because it clearly says here, inspired from a new game called Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I don't know if he added that or if recent news outlets just took that little part out so it sounded like inspired from a new game. But there you have it. That's why I think a Naughty Dog fantasy game would be perfect for where they need to go next. You know, that's me. Let me know what you think and feel. As always, take care of yourselves, look out for each other. Peace!